But when I look at the people who are out there doing the violence, that's not the people that we see during the day who are legitimately out there exercising their First Amendment rights and to be able to express their feelings about the immigration enforcement issue. These are people who are all hooded up. They've got a hoodie on. They've got face masks on. They're people who do this all the time, get away with whatever they can, go out there, from one civil unrest situation to another, using the same or similar tactics frequently. And they are connected. Some would call them anarchists or by any other variety of names, but they're people that we run across routinely city to city, and this is what they do. So even more disgusting that many of the people who are doing this come in from other places just to hurt people and to cause havoc.
If you're not planning to invoke that Insurrection Act, you still plan to send troops?
Well, we're going to have troops everywhere. We're not going to let this happen to our country. We're not going to let our country be torn apart like it was under Biden and his auto pen.
What's the bar for sending Marines to...
The bar is what I think it is. I mean, if we see danger to our country and to our citizens, we'll be very, very strong in terms of law and order. It's about law and order.
Get your hands off these poor people. They're just trying to live their lives, man. Trying to live their lives, paying their taxes. Been here 10 years. The fear, the horror. The hell is this guy? Come after me, arrest me. Let's just get it over with. Tough guy. You know, I don't give a damn. But I care about my community. I care about this community. The hell are they doing? These guys need to grow up. They need to stop. And we need to push back. And I'm sorry to be so clear, but that kind of bloviating is exhausting. So, Tom, arrest me. Let's go.
Hey, Inspire Tribe, my fellow freedom lovers, it's John Nolan here. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is Monday, June 9th, 2025, out of the matrix into prime reality, which basically means seeing things for what they are rather than for what they are presented to be. Thank you so much for joining us on X, Rumble, and YouTube, and in the live chat. Kristin is not here with us today, but our wonderful moderator and friend Ronnie is here. It's good to see you all, and thank you, Ronnie, for the fantastic work you're doing. All right, well, we have big week behind us, probably bigger week ahead of us. We saw the Trump-Musk feud, very, very strange, kind of hardcore really quickly. And in the meantime, we saw Russia-Ukraine flare up really in a big way. And then we see LA, which is becoming its own little war zone over allegedly, the ICE deportation situation that was going on there. But looking at the protests, looking at the riots, if you know what to look for, you can spot the psyop. You can spot clearly that this is not unorganized. And I think it's the beginning, sort of the first domino in a number of similar events that are going to come up. That there are some events already planned, some protests in many, many cities. But I think we're going to see more of this. What is more interesting really is this initial ritual. This is a ritual. And if you're watching this, you already know how many psychological operations are out there, how they're unfolding every day. But where we have to start is from the end. We can't understand this ritual in a larger picture if we don't remember what the end is. And the end goal is and remains for the people who have the megaphones, who have the cameras, the people who basically own public perception, right? Or at least the creation of public perception. What the end goal is the absolute technocratic agenda, the technocratic world where everything is AI connected, the internet of everything, where surveillance is at every corner. It might not look the same way that it looks in China. It might not feel the same way that it looks or feels in North Korea, but it is exactly the same thing. If you look at the UK today with millions of CCTV cameras, this is what is supposed to happen everywhere in the world. It is supposed to become a completely AI technocratic centered world order. That is the goal. Now, we have got a huge hint earlier this year when the big, beautiful bill was introduced. And very few people caught this early on, but I know we reported on it. There is a section in that big, beautiful bill that says everything. It spells out exactly where we are. And that section says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, that no state or no political entity in a state, which means any jurisdiction in that state, can create rules or laws that limit the development and implementation of AI, artificial intelligence, for 10 years. So basically, through that bill, which hasn't, in that bill, it says that for 10 years, states and any jurisdiction in those states can regulate or in some way limit the development and implementation of AI systems. That is the biggest giveaway of where this is supposed to go. This says it all. So how does this connect to the LA rituals? And why is this even a ritual? Why do I call it a ritual? Well, let's look at the hallmarks of a ritual, and it will become very, very clear very quickly why I call this a ritual and where this is supposed to go. So in ancient rituals, a sacrifice wasn't always death. What has to be created through a ritual is enough attention, and the sacrifice is a huge energetic transformation, if you will, and the attention is what gives all that energy, right? So in the psyops and in modern rituals, the sacrifice is the public peace. So that's the first thing that gets sacrificed, right? The order, the more or less harmonious public peace. It's less than more, but still, it just means things kind of go normal. So that's the first thing that sacrifices, that normalcy feeling. It's gone. Human dignity, very quickly, because of the sort of very, very quickly, you can see in the communication, the hatred, the outrage, and the self-respect gets lost, because when people react emotionally so in such an uncontrolled way, they lose their self-respect. They only learn that later, not in the moment. And of course, the emotional energy of the people, right? The rage, the fear, the confusion, and truth and clarity, that's the fog of war. Always the first casualty of war is the truth. It doesn't matter anymore. And by the way, I want to just say this right off the bat. What we see on the surface, which supposedly is the reason for the protests and the riots, is never the real reason. It's never what it's really about. We have to understand that. Even if we're emotionally invested, even if we have family that's affected, that's never the real reason. That is the catalyst, okay? So the first offering in this ritual is an uncontrolled emotional outburst. And the more people that you can get to emotionally react in an uncontrolled way, the better. That's what the media is for. That's what social media is for. That's what supposedly, there's supposedly two sides here, the left and the right, and the conservative and the liberals and blah, 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 but they're all doing the same thing, and they're all serving the ritual. So that's the first thing that happens. Then it's interesting. Why is the beginning of this Los Angeles, right? A highly significant place for many, many reasons. Those who study the occult, those who study the sort of the darker spheres, know it's a highly significant place, but it's also, on the flip side, always been a highly energized and spiritual place. Many, many people who feel spiritually inclined have gone there and been there and spent there. So there's a lot of energy there to be harvested. And rituals need to happen in energetically charged places. Of course, it's also still not to the degree that it used to be in pop culture for movies and entertainment. It is a projector to sections of the world, the Western world for certain, that sort of projects where the world is going, what the agendas are, and what the intentions are. And it's a place that it's historically fairly easy to ignite. I mean, partially because it's such a cultural melting pot, right? Because of its history, because of its history of very public activism. So you pick LA as that spot, and it's usually going to work, right? It will work. And you have, of course, for this narrative, for the immigration, for the illegal immigration, for this, and in many ways, it's a dehumanization narrative too. You have the perfect setting in LA to ignite this fire. And we're going to get, by the way, into also how this subject has been hijacked and heavily manipulated, the illegal immigration, if you will. So perfect location for this to get it started. And then we have to remember the classic format that never changes: problem, chaos / reaction, solution. That is always the same. But you don't start with the problem. Actually, they work for decades on the solution that they want, which is a new system, a new way of everything. So that is their solution. And then they reverse engineer the path of how to get there, right? So every ritual is playing into that format. You have the solution that you want, which is this massive surveillance system, and you have to somehow soften the resistance of those people who are still resistant to it. And if you think about the political division in the 2020, 21, 22, they were softening any resistance that was from what we perceive to be the left, right? The liberal side and the extreme liberal. They were completely annihilating any resistance to surveillance systems through the medical sector, right? They pushed surveillance. They said, we need to test everyone. We need to have a database. We need to make sure that everybody's up to date on their, and people were cheering for it. People were saying anything goes because this is such a threat. That didn't fly for the political right and for the people who are more conservative. Some, but mostly they rejected that. They rejected this medical tyranny, if you will, and said, no, we're not going to have it. So for them to soften the stance, you need to find a different subject. You need to soften their emotional stance differently. And this is what these subjects do to the political right leaning. So you create the problem. Of course, we saw that. And immigration, illegal immigration, undocumented immigration in America has been a decade-long, if not century-long discussion, and largely tolerated phenomenon because of the demand for that kind of labor, and because of the sort of the if you want, a shadow economy that was created through it that could not have been created hadn't it been for that kind of illegal immigration. And in the last 4 years, the narrative has changed dramatically. We've seen a situation where truly, and I know this firsthand from the folks that we know personally that were working down at the border, this was literally opened. It was uncontrolled, and it created a situation that demanded a reaction where you can't go without a reaction. So many people so many people that are clearly here with very ill intentions, but that has nothing to do with legacy immigrants, documented or not, who've been here for years and decades, living a normal life, contributing in the way that they contribute. Those are two completely different things. Now, those lines are getting very, very blurry right now, right? That's the problem, where you create this tension, and you fuel the fire, and you fuel the fire, and you fuel the fire until there is a reaction, until it gets emotionally unstable. That's all you need. And then you send in the agent provocateurs, then you send in the professional protesters, then you send in those folks who do this for a living. And there are organizations that you can hire that come in and that build the momentum for protests that know exactly how to steer crowds, that know exactly how to use social media, that know exactly how to commandeer and to get to the desired outcome, which in these cases is always destruction, riots, violence. And we'll get to the why that is so important. A peaceful protest can be very effective. It can be. A violent one is hyper effective, but never for the cause that the protester seems to be there for. It's for the exact opposite every single time. So this will be, keep this in mind, the problem, reaction, solution. You can't see it if you're emotionally invested. You can only see it when you step out and you analyze as an analyst. Sit down and just observe what's happening. Whom does it really serve? Okay? So this is not new. The newness of this is simply that we have amplified attention, we have social media, we have AI, we have various agencies, government and non-government, that have massive resources to push these things through and to create amazing campaigns, images, footage, AI footage. I mean, you name it, everything's there. That's what makes it so amplified. So then the mass participation is, which I just pointed at, is what creates and gives it so much energy. And today, you don't need to worry that much about how many people are there in person. You need as many people as create good images, but even that can be faked. So what is really important is that you keep the media, the social media, the alternative media engaged within the narrative and keep emotionally charging the situation. That is the attention. That's where the ritual gets its energy from. That's what they do with Super Bowls. That's what they do with the Oscars. That's what they do with the Olympics. These events are guaranteed to get hundreds of millions, if not billions of eyeballs, right? That's what they need. And then you can create whatever ritual you want because you have the energetic sustenance to do it. And this is what doesn't only shape the narrative, but it literally controls the frequency, which is what this is all about. You can't have today, you can't, they don't even give us weeks of peace, right? Weeks of just normal news cycles. They don't even give us days, because what is the phenomenon of this time, because of the critical mass, you and many others out there, that is raising the frequency so consistently that you need to constantly be there and disturb the field so it doesn't rise too far, because none of these things can happen if consciousness is above a certain level. They're just not happening. So all of this is also aimed at disrupting the frequency, keep it down. And it is very challenging, even for the most trained meditators. When you are approached or when you witness something that personally touches you because of your life story, because whatever, you are an immigrant, or it doesn't matter what it is, as long as it touches you. And when it touches you, it's very challenging to stay in a more high vibrational state, because you're a human being. You have stories, you have emotions, you have relatives, you have friends. It's natural. And that's what they're counting on. They're counting on finding all the hot buttons, all the trigger issues, to trigger as many people as possible into emotional reactions to lower the frequency. And that's what you need. And then, of course, it's about what are you bringing in and what are they wanting to bring in. And this is now, thankfully, it's an overused word almost in the social media sphere, but Palunteer, and we've talked about Palunteer quite a lot, is a partially intelligence, partially created by the intelligence community, heavily funded by the intelligence community, officially by Peter Thiel. We've talked about him a lot. Go watch a few interviews if you can sit through them. I can't. I mean, for research reasons, I do it, but it's like the most painful thing to watch that guy speak. Unbelievable. But Palunteer is a huge partner for the government, and it was recently announced that there's going to be this massive database. And immigration was going to be the selling point, or illegal immigration for that matter. The selling point here is to have a full database of all immigrants, illegal immigrants, undocumented immigrants, criminal immigrants. And that is something that people root for. But what they didn't say, and it's in the fine print, is in order to achieve that, we're just going to have everyone in there. And we're just going to have a biometric profile of everyone in there. And then we're not going to have to worry about border walls so much, because that biometric profile can be accessed and located at any given time, which means you can be accessed and located at any given time, which is the biometric AI database. And that's really what this whole thing seems to be pointing towards. I'm not saying I know this for a fact, but all the indicators are that this is what where this is going. And a few other things that we could also discuss as to why we have all these rituals and psyops unfold one after the other. This is where things are basically headed. So that's the hidden objective. The sacrifice and the attention, that's what provides the energy. The subject at hand, like I said in the very beginning, is never the real objective. It's how to get there. So you had, for example, over since the last recession, since the last crisis, 08, 09, the crash, you will remember that there were many stories that came out about all the corruption, all the hidden accounts and billions of dollars in offshore paradises, and how they funnel that money out of there, and how they don't pay taxes, and how all of this is happening. What the stories were supposed to create was this huge Occupy Wall Street movement, a lot of attention, a lot of energy. You will remember the mass protests in New York. That was all not the real objective. The real objective was to get people to the place where they not only accept, but actually demand digital oversight, where they demand, where it's much better, and people will say, well, it's much better to have a digital currency. There's no more money laundering. There's no more drug money. There's no more illegal activities. Everything's monitored. That was the buildup, right? And we have to look at these much bigger pictures when we look at such events as the one that we're facing and looking at now. And of course, a justification, by the way, in such a ritual is to bring in and install stricter rules, for sure, but also, when you call in the National Guard, and even say you might call in the Marines, you're playing, you're on very hot ground when it comes to the Constitution, but you're on very hot ground when it comes to precedent. And once a precedent is set, which is, you need a reason to set a precedent, but once you set the precedent, you can come back and say, hey, we've done it here, we can do it again if we need to, right? We've already done it, we've seen it works. This is the softening of the stance. And I want to make one thing also very clear. In the eyes of those who still control this game, we're pawns, you and me. But even the politicians in seemingly powerful positions, in the eyes of those who steer this game, are pawns. They're not the ones steering the game. And so often they don't even know they're pawns. You just have to push a few buttons, and you really put someone in a spot where they have to react in some way. You push the buttons, and they only have 3 options, right? So you control the game that way. And of course, you still have the media. If it wasn't clear, maybe now it's becoming clear, there is no widespread alternative media. There is the mainstream media, which most people in the truth and freedom community have rejected. Then there is the alternative mainstream media, which had the appearance of being alternative until the last 5 years, where it was completely streamlined and is basically either an alternative version of the left media or an alternative version of the right media. You know, it's basically that. But they still toe, in the end, they still toe the party line. In the end, they still push people towards the party, Republican or Democrat in the United States, but no different in other places, just different names. And the alternative media still pushes the narratives just from a little broader perspective. You know, they give you some of the goodies, but there really aren't many true researchers out there, specifically when it comes to politics and how it all intertwines and the end goals. You have a few really, really good ones. You know, the David Ikes of the world, the Whitney Webbs of the world, really great, great investigative journalists, and others. I mean, that list is, you know, it is there, but those are not the flashy names that you see all the time. The flashy names that you see are complete. They're frauds. They're not real alternative researchers or journalists. But here, as you can see, as intended and easy to predict, it's turning into a shouting match on social media. And interestingly enough, very quickly, for example, the alternative mainstream media on the right is start to calling for the Palunteer, the AI solution, the drones, the tracking, the say, hey, we need it just for the immigrants, just for the situation, just to get a handle on it, but we need it. Big surprise there, right? Big surprise there. And this is exactly how it works. Where the left called for this during the 2021 and 2, the right calls for this right now. Something that they rejected wholeheartedly for decades, years and decades, is now called for. And that's what you want. That's exactly why such rituals are being created. And here is where we get to the most important part of this. Here's where we get to you and our community and people out there who see through it. First, they feel through it. They feel immediately that something is off. Some events unfold and you don't have that feeling. You kind of know this is an authentic event. And then you see another one and you feel it and you see, no, this is not what they're saying it is. And people, especially spiritually inclined people that pay attention to their vibration, that pay attention to their well-being, that want to be positive contributors, they almost have this intuitive reaction to just stay away. I don't blame you, but I don't think it's right, because it's the awareness. It's to speak out and say, no, this is not what it looks like. Step back, go into your heart space, use your brain, and now observe the situation. What is it actually showing us? This is a ritual. Why are they creating this? Who will benefit from this? Who is already benefiting from this? And who is always on the losing end of things? Because the awareness from people that are not fighters and warriors that go out and just look for something to punch and just go to blame the other side or blame the Democrats or blame the Republicans. For people that are not that way, that are much clearer and more balanced, like many of you are, you bringing awareness to this can actually help shift the energy around these events, because they want nothing more than emotional reactions. Like I said before, it doesn't really matter who you fight with as long as you keep fighting. As long as you keep fighting someone, the immigrant, the other party, the other guys, the ICE or the police, as long as we hate on someone and keep fighting, we're contributing to the kind of energy and vibration that they want. But that doesn't mean to be harmless and to be sort of to just be, apathetic to the situation. No, it's to speak truth. Truth is always empowering. And to say, hey, we don't need to do this. We don't need to emotionally invest in this. We can actually create a harmonious atmosphere here, and we can talk about the subjects that are really supposed to be discussed here, and not the surface reason that is being presented to us. And by the way, if you ask me, anybody who is harming another or their property has committed a crime, And society has a right to deal with that person and protect themselves from more of that harm. I mean, that's just a given. Any natural society does it. And in our artificial society, that's just the same. So people who are criminals and people who hurt others, sure. But there must be a clear line drawn in the sand between how you treat a criminal and someone who, and I'll give you an example. This is where my heart goes. Millions of children that came here as babies or very, very small children with their parents, and those parents might have come here undocumented, and that's definitely not the right thing to do, so don't get me wrong. But those children grew up here. For all intents and purposes, they're Americans. That's all they know. That's where they live. That's where they've gone to school. That's where they work. That's where everything. And right now, the lines are blurred completely. And this is just, I understand why it's happening. I can comprehend logically how agencies and agents are extremely frustrated because they weren't allowed to do their jobs properly for years. And now finally, and now they feel like they have to make up for all of that. I get all of that. I can understand all of that. But if we lose our humanity in the process, if we lose our heart in the process, we've lost what people deem they want to protect. And so don't allow yourself to be seduced into this hatred, into this division. It's going against your spirit, right? It's all good. And if we live in a society that creates all these rules, if we want to change that, we should change it. But I understand that people say we got to follow those rules that were created. I think differently. I always feel, and I've expressed this a million times, but understand it's a progression. We need to get there. What is most important is that on a consciousness level, on a vibration level, we don't go into these states of fear, of rage, of anger, of division, of hatred. That is the name of the game. And they're going to do anything and everything because that's all they have. That's all they have, is to seduce us into these states. They can't stand it when we rise above it. They can't stand it when we find common ground where they have sowed division. They can't stand it if we overcome differences and see more eye to eye than not. And that should be an invitation. So many times over the last years, I have made myself bridge a divide that I didn't really feel like bridging because, like any other human being, if you hear someone talk so much shit, you just go, I don't want to deal with it. But sometimes taking that step and reaching out and trying to find some common ground, which there always is, can be an extremely wonderful thing. And that's what they're afraid of, is that we actually at some point smell their bullshit, come together, and unite. Because that's game over. For anyone and any system who wishes to control, who wishes to rule, it's game over when the people unite. A united people will always, by default, disable such systems. So that's my encouragement. We don't know exactly where the situation is going. We don't know exactly how far it's going to escalate, and whether in these other places that the protests are bound to happen. I believe on Flag Day, June 14th and beyond. We don't know how far all of this will go. My bet is the more that people call for the surveillance system, the less of this they're going to need. But there's the third alternative. Go and come together more, as much as we can. All right, friends, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being here with us. I invite you to come over to Locals, our wonderful community on Locals, inspired.locals.com. We'll do a coffee and truth there in a little bit. It's intimate. It's for people that are looking for community, more connection, ways to communicate, connect with each other. Some of our wonderful members there are having regular calls, Zoom calls, and connecting with each other. So if that speaks to you, and more intimate shows, more Q&A style, hop on over, inspired.locals.com. All right, my friends, thank you so much for tuning in. You know we love you. We appreciate you. And we will be back with you again very, very soon. Are you looking for like-minded and like-hearted people to connect with? Then the Inspired Community on Locals is the right place for you. You can post, comment, share, and connect with others, and our shows there are completely uncensored and unfiltered. It's stuff we can't talk about here. It's such a great community, and there are 0 trolls. We keep the subscription fees super low, so 19 cents per day. Keep the trolls away. Join us today at inspired.locals.com. We can't wait to see you there.